The humans were ready to kick some alien ass, and they sent their biggest badass to do it. Gerald Warren, a soldier built like a brick shithouse, was hand-picked for the most dangerous missions. This time, he was being sent to the shithole planet of Teller Prime. The Tellarite scum there had been raiding human colonies, killing women and children. It was time for some good old-fashioned payback. Gerald's stealth shuttle rocketed towards the hostile world, its cloaking device rendering it invisible to sensors. He was going in quiet to recon an enemy outpost, gathering intel for the coming invasion. But just as the shuttle hit the upper atmosphere, a massive electromagnetic pulse slammed into it, frying the electronics. The crippled craft spiraled out of control, plummeting towards the rugged wilderness below. When the shuttle smashed into the rocky ground, it crumpled like a tin can. But Gerald was no ordinary man. Genetically enhanced and hardened by countless battles, he walked away from the wreckage with barely a scratch. His comms were fried, though, and he found himself stranded deep in hostile territory with no backup. A lesser soldier might have despaired at being alone on an alien world crawling with vicious hostiles out for blood, but not Gerald. The odds were stacked against him, but that's the way he liked it. He checked his assault rifle, salvaging what gear he could, and set out towards the enemy base. He had a job to do, and no Tellarite bastard was going to stop him. As he pushed through the dense alien foliage, a spine-chilling roar split the air. A massive beast burst out of the undergrowth, all fangs and claws and rippling muscle. It looked like a mutant offspring of a grizzly bear and an alligator. The creature lunged at Gerald, but the big man was ready. He sidestepped the slashing claws and seized the beast by the throat, his iron grip digging into its hide. The monster thrashed and snapped its jaws, but Gerald held firm. With a brutal twist, he wrenched the animal's head around until its neck snapped with a sickening crunch. As the beast dropped dead at his feet, Gerald examined the carcass. Its claws and fangs were razor-sharp, natural weapons perfectly suited for this hellish environment. With a few deft cuts of his combat knife, Gerald harvested the bioweapons for his own use. The same tools that made the beast so deadly would now even the odds in his favor. Armed with fang and claw, he continued his relentless advance towards the Tellarite base. Meanwhile, alarms began blaring in the alien outpost's command center. Commander Thule, the base's ruthless overseer, scowled at the display showing the humans' crashed shuttle. "One survivor?" Thule growled to his subordinates. "Scans show it's a lone human male." The Tellarite commander sneered, revealing rows of jagged teeth. He had studied the Earthlings' physiology and found them to be soft, weak creatures. His elite forces would tear this intruder to shreds. "I want search parties out there immediately," Thule snarled. "Find this human and eliminate him. I don't want a single Terran maggot drawing breath on my planet." As the Tellarite soldiers mobilized, Gerald drew ever closer to their stronghold. He knew he was walking into the beast's den, but he had no choice. The intel he carried could turn the tide of the war, saving countless human lives. But first, he'd have to survive the coming onslaught. One man against an army of alien killers on the most hostile world imaginable. The odds were grim, but that just made the challenge all the sweeter. Gerald gripped his rifle tighter, a predatory grin spreading across his chiseled features. These Xeno bastards had no idea what was coming for them. They thought one human posed no threat. They were about to learn just how fucking strong humans could be. Gerald crept through the alien underbrush, the Tellarite outpost growing larger with each step. His senses were on high alert, scanning for any sign of the enemy. Suddenly, plasma bolts seared the air around him as a squad of 6 burly Tellarite soldiers emerged from the foliage, weapons blazing. "There's the Terran filth!" roared Lieutenant Cragg, Thule's second-in-command. "Cut him down!" Gerald hurled himself behind a massive boulder as the plasma rifles unleashed hell, superheated energy exploding against his makeshift cover. He blind-fired his assault rifle around the boulder's edge, but the bullets sparked harmlessly off the Tellarite's shimmering energy shields. "Shit," Gerald growled, ducking back as a plasma bolt nearly took his head off. "Those damn shields are tough as fuck." He eyed the surrounding jungle, searching for anything to tip the scales. A cluster of bulbous, pulsating plants caught his eye. Tellarite blast spore pods, volatile as all hell. One rupture, and they'd go off like a tac nuke. Gerald gripped a frag grenade, his plan crystallizing. He counted down from 3, then lobbed the grenade at the plants and dove away. The grenade detonated, igniting the blast spores in a massive white-hot fireball. The shockwave slammed into Gerald like a freight train, but he held tight behind the boulder. Agonized shrieks told him the Tellarites fared worse. He peeked around and grinned ferally. 2 charred corpses lay unmoving, and Crag writhed on the ground, purple blood gushing from his mangled legs. Gerald seized the opening and charged, rifle barking. 2 more Tellarites dropped, holes blown clean through their skulls. He closed on the final pair, ready to get up close and personal. One swung a crackling shock baton at his head. Gerald ducked the blow and drove his rifle butt into the alien's face, crunching through bone and brain. The other Tellarite grabbed him from behind, thick arms crushing his chest. Gerald snapped his head back, smashing the alien's jaw, then pivoted and caught him in a lightning-fast arm lock. Crack! The Tellarite crumpled, neck bent at an unnatural angle. Panting, Gerald turned to Lieutenant Craig, who crawled pathetically through the dirt, dragging his ruined legs. Gerald seized the big fucker by the throat, hoisting him one-handed. "Thule, we'll flay you, alive," Crag gasped through his shattered jaw. "And mount your hide, as a trophy." Gerald smirked coldly. "Not if I kill him first." Snap! Crag went limp, his neck crushed in Gerald's iron grip. Gerald collected some Tellarite plasma weapons and a working comm unit, then headed off, one step closer to his objective. Back at the outpost, Commander Thule slammed a meaty fist on his console as Craig's distress signal cut to static. "I'll rip that Terran apart myself," Thule seethed. He turned to his scientific advisor. "Prepare the serum, now." The advisor nodded nervously. "Yes, Commander. Enough for you and your 4 best warriors." Thule grinned savagely. The human's own enhanced biology would be his undoing. He would prove Tellarite superiority by beating the Earthling at his own game. As Gerald approached the outpost, Thule and his superhuman death squad made their final preparations, ready to spring their trap and end this human insurgence once and for all. In the merciless jungle of Tellar Prime, 2 superhuman forces barreled towards a bloodbath that would decide the fate of worlds. Gerald advanced through the dense alien foliage, his muscles taut and senses on high alert. The Tellarite plasma rifle felt unfamiliar in his hands, but he'd make do. As he neared the outpost perimeter, a twig snapped nearby. Gerald froze, ears straining. Suddenly, the undergrowth exploded with movement. 5 massive shapes burst forth, Thula and 4 hulking warriors. Their eyes gleamed with feral intensity, veins pulsing beneath taut skin. "Well, shit," Gerald muttered. Thule stepped forward, bearing razor-sharp teeth. "Face me, human filth. Prove your species isn't as weak as we believe." Gerald tossed aside the rifle. "All right, ugly. Let's dance." They clashed in a fury of fists and feet. Gerald's roundhouse kick slammed into Thule's ribs with a satisfying crunch, but the Tellarite barely flinched, his artificially enhanced body shrugging off the blow. Thule countered with a vicious uppercut that snapped Gerald's head back. As they traded earth-shattering blows, Thule's warriors spread out, weapons trained on Gerald. He knew he had to act fast. With a roar, Gerald seized Thule's arm and hurled the alien commander into 2 of his soldiers. The Tellarites went down in a tangle of limbs. Gerald whirled to face the others. He caught the 3rd warrior's fist mid-swing and twisted. Bones snapped like twigs as the alien howled in agony. The 4th opened fire, plasma bolts sizzling past Gerald's ear. He closed the gap in 2 bounds and smashed the rifle from the Tellarite's grasp. They grappled furiously, trading crushing blows. Gerald's vision blurred as a hammer-like fist connected with his jaw. He tasted blood. Rage flooded his system. With a feral snarl, Gerald headbutted the alien, feeling its skull give way beneath the impact. Thule and his remaining troops attacked en masse. Gerald met their charge head-on, his limbs a blur of devastating strikes. Bones crunched, and alien blood sprayed as he fought like a man possessed. In the chaotic melee, a stray plasma bolt struck a nearby cluster of blast spore pods. The world erupted in searing white light. The concussive blast flung Gerald and Thule skyward as the outpost crumbled. Gerald slammed into the ground, his enhanced physique absorbing the worst of the impact. He staggered to his feet, vision swimming. Through the flames and smoke, he spotted Thule crawling towards a fallen syringe. "Oh, no you don't," Gerald growled. He lunged forward, stomping the vial into useless shards. Seizing Thule by the throat, Gerald hoisted the alien aloft. "It ain't drugs that make us strong," he snarled. "It's pure human fucking will." With a mighty heave, Gerald hurled Thule into the inferno, consuming the ruined outpost. The alien's screams were lost in the roar of the flames. Panting heavily, Gerald limped through the wreckage. He found a cracked data terminal and yanked out its drives, praying they held vital intel. A shuttle's engines whined nearby, his ticket out of this hellhole. As the battered craft lifted off, Gerald patched into the comms system. "This is Agent Warren. Mission accomplished. Sending data now. Prep the med bay. I could use a Band-Aid." He leaned back, exhausted but triumphant. The Tellarites would rue the day they fucked with humanity. And Gerald, he was just getting started. Gerald's shuttle touched down at Central Command with a hiss of hydraulics. He strode into the briefing room, still sporting bruises and bandages from his encounter on Teller Prime. The assembled brass snapped to attention. "At ease," General Hawthorne grunted. "Warren, your intel was solid gold. Now we've got bigger fish to fry." The holotable flickered to life, displaying a cratered lunar surface. "Chiron," Hawthorne explained. "Tellarite forward base. Intel says they're prepping to hit Proxima Centauri." Gerald studied the fortified complex. "Conventional assault?" "Too risky," Colonel Chen chimed in. "Those subsurface hangars are shielded to hell and back." Hawthorne fixed Gerald with a determined eyes. "That's where you come in. We're assembling an elite squad. You'll lead them in. Tear that base apart from the inside." Gerald nodded grimly. "When do we move?" Hours later, a stealth lander pierced Chiron's thin atmosphere. Gerald addressed his team of 5 augmented soldiers. "Right, Kowalski, you're on diversion. Rodriguez, Tanaka, demo duty. Chen, you're with me. We infiltrate command." The lander touched down silently. Gerald's team used jetpacks to bound across the lunar surface, their bulky forms sailing through the low gravity. They reached an auxiliary shaft, cutting through with plasma torches. Gerald led the way, dropping into the cavernous facility. "Move out," he whispered. Wright and Kowalski peeled off, heading for the hangars. Rodriguez and Tanaka began planting charges at key junctions. Gerald and Chen ghosted through corridors, dodging patrols. They reached the command deck, where Gerald turned to his partner. "Watch my 6, he growled. The door exploded inward. Gerald charged through the smoke, his fists ablur. Tellarite guards crumpled under the assault. He spotted the Admiral, a hulking brute twice his size. The alien roared, charging forward. Gerald ducked under swinging fists, driving his knee into the Admiral's gut. They grappled furiously, crashing into consoles. With a savage twist, Gerald drove the Admiral backwards. The alien's spine met a jutting screen with a sickening crunch. As alarms blared, Gerald downloaded critical data. He rejoined his team, sprinting for the exit. "Charge is set," Rodriguez called out. "Blow it," Gerald ordered. The base rocked with explosions. Gerald's team rocketed skyward on jetpacks as massive fireballs consumed the facility below. In the lander, Gerald allowed himself a grim smile. The Tellarites would think twice before underestimating humanity again. The stealth lander barely cleared Chiron's atmosphere before General Hawthorne's face materialized on the comm screen. His eyes blazed with intensity. "Warren, we've got another situation. Intel just located a Tellarite bioweapons lab near Andoria. You're going in." Gerald nodded, his muscles still aching from the previous mission. "What's the target?" a subterranean complex developing viruses engineered to wipe out humanity. Your team will infiltrate, gather intel, and neutralize the threat. Hours later, Gerald's squad huddled at the mouth of a steaming geothermal vent. An ion storm raged overhead, masking their approach. He signaled, and they plunged into the scorching tunnel. They emerged into sterile, white corridors. Two Tellarite guards turned, eyes widening. Before they could react, Gerald's team struck. Silenced weapons coughed, and the aliens crumpled. "Move," Gerald whispered. They prowled deeper, disabling security systems. In a restricted wing, Gerald froze. Through a viewing window, he saw rows of containment pods. Inside each, a human test subject writhed in agony, skin blistering and melting. "Jesus," breathed Corporal Chen. Gerald's lips pursed. "Keep going." They reached a sealed airlock marked Level 4 Biohazard. Gerald hacked the lock, and they entered a vast chamber filled with bubbling vats of sickly green fluid. Suddenly, his comm crackled. "Warren, Tellarite reinforcements inbound. ETA 5 minutes." Gerald turned to his team. "Take what samples you can and get topside. I'm staying to shut this hellhole down." "But sir..." "That's an order. Move." As his squad retreated, Gerald sprinted deeper into the complex. Alarms blared. He rounded a corner and came face to face with a Tellarite security team. Plasma bolts seared the air. Gerald ducked and rolled, returning fire. His enhanced reflexes let him dance between their shots, closing the distance. He leapt, fists and feet lashing out in a whirlwind of strikes. Bones snapped under his superhuman blows. More guards poured in. A plasma bolt caught Gerald in the shoulder, searing flesh. He staggered but kept fighting. His body was a weapon, smashing through their ranks. Panting, Gerald reached the main production chamber. He pounded his fist into the control panel, initiating an overload sequence. Grabbing demo charges from his pack, he hurled them at the massive storage tanks. The explosions rocked the facility. Alarms shrieked as containment ruptured. Gerald sprinted for the exit as virulent mist filled the air. Behind him, Tellarite screams turned to gurgles as the bioweapons did their work. Gerald's lungs burned, but his enhanced physiology held. He burst from the complex into Andoria's thin atmosphere. Tapping his comm, he gasped out, "Mission accomplished. Bioweapons neutralized." Then darkness took him. He awoke in the medbay of a human cruiser, covered in bandages. The ship's doctor gaped at his readings. "It's impossible," she muttered. "You were exposed to enough bioweapons to kill a planet. How are you even alive?" Gerald managed a weak grin. "Just too stubborn to die, Doc." As news of the raid spread, humanity's spirits soared. The Tellarites had thrown their worst at Gerald Warren, and he'd spat in their faces. Now it was humanity's turn to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of. Gerald's muscles screamed as he hauled himself out of the medical pod. Weeks of inactivity had left him weak, but his enhanced physiology was already working overtime to rebuild his strength. He gritted his teeth and forced himself to stand. "Easy there, Warren," cautioned Dr. Reeves. "You've been through hell." Gerald ignored her, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. "Brief me," he demanded. Hours later, he stood before a holographic display of the Tellarite shipyards. General Hawthorne's voice crackled over the comm. "This is it, Warren. One last push to end this war." Gerald studied the schematics, committing every detail to memory. "We'll get it done, sir." The stealth shuttle sliced through the inky void of space, its experimental cloaking technology rendering it invisible to Tellarite sensors. Gerald checked his team's gear one final time as they approached the drop zone. "Remember," he growled, "we hit hard and fast. No mistakes." They plummeted through the atmosphere, their nanofiber suits absorbing the heat of re-entry. As they neared the industrial zone, Gerald gave the signal. Chutes deployed silently, and the team drifted down into the shadows of massive shipyard structures. Gerald's boots touched down on alien soil. He quickly gathered his chute and signaled the all clear. His team moved with practiced precision, weaving between sensor sweeps and patrols. They reached the Power Nexus compound. Gerald nodded to Sergeant Chen, who produced a compact plasma cutter. The device hummed to life, slicing through the bulkhead like butter. In seconds, they had their entry point. Inside the reactor core, the air crackled with energy. Gerald's skin prickled as he moved past towering conduits pulsing with raw power. He spotted a Tellarite technician and moved in. His hands clamped over the alien's mouth, twisting sharply. A muffled crack, and the body went limp. Suddenly, alarms blared. Gerald cursed under his breath. "Move!" he barked. They sprinted deeper into the facility, encountering increasing resistance. Plasma bolts sizzled past as Tellarite security forces converged on their position. Private Rodriguez turned to Gerald, his eyes blazing. "We'll hold them off, sir. Complete the mission." Before Gerald could protest, Rodriguez and Corporal Tanaka charged into the oncoming horde. Their sacrifice bought precious seconds as Gerald and the remaining team members pushed forward. They reached the reactor control chamber, sealing the blast doors behind them. Gerald's fingers flew over the alien console, priming the EMP device. Outside, the pounding of Tellarite weaponry grew more frantic. "Sir!" shouted Chen, returning fire through a gap in the doors. "We can't hold them much longer." Gerald slammed the final sequence into place. The device hummed ominously, building to overload. "It's done," he breathed. A blinding flash erupted from the device. Gerald felt a searing pain, then darkness claimed him. Consciousness returned in fragments, sterile white walls, the beep of medical equipment. Gerald's eyes fluttered open to find General Hawthorne standing over him. "You crazy son of a bitch," Hawthorne said, a rare smile on his weathered face. "You actually did it." Gerald tried to speak, but his throat was raw. Hawthorne continued, "The Tellarites are finished. You broke their back, Warren. The war's over." As the implications sank in, Gerald allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Humanity had proven itself against impossible odds. The galaxy would never be the same. Gerald's path to recovery was arduous, but his enhanced physiology accelerated the healing process. As he regained his strength, accolades poured in from across human space. News feeds buzzed with tales of his exploits, hailing him as the savior of humanity. Yet even as Gerald basked in the glow of victory, a new threat lurked in the shadows. Terra Primus, a radical isolationist group, launched a series of devastating attacks on Earth's governing councils. Their leader, General Corvin, railed against alien integration in impassioned speeches that inflamed xenophobic sentiment. Gerald was lounging in his quarters when the alert came through. "Warren, report to command immediately," barked General Hawthorne's voice. Minutes later, Gerald strode into a bustling war room. Hawthorne's face was grim as he gestured to a holographic display of a fortified bunker. "Terra Primus has seized the assembly chambers," Hawthorne explained. "They're holding ambassadors hostage. We need you to lead an extraction team." Gerald studied the schematics, his mind racing. "I'll need a squad of our best operatives." "Granted," Hawthorne nodded, "but be careful. We have intel suggesting Corvin's developed some new tricks." Hours later, Gerald's team infiltrated the complex through maintenance tunnels. They moved silently, weapons at the ready. As they approached the main chamber, Gerald held up a fist, signaling a halt. "Something's not right," he whispered. Suddenly, the walls erupted with gunfire. Enhanced soldiers, their eyes glowing an unnatural blue, poured from hidden alcoves. Gerald's team returned fire, but their weapons seemed ineffective against these juggernauts. "Fall back!" Gerald shouted as he watched Private Chen crumple under a hail of bullets. They retreated down twisting corridors, the sound of heavy footsteps echoing behind them. Gerald's mind raced. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They moved with inhuman speed and shrugged off wounds that should have been fatal. As they reached a junction, Gerald made a split-second decision. "Rodriguez, Tanaka, left corridor. Draw them off. I'm going for the hostages." Gerald sprinted down the right passageway, the sounds of combat fading behind him. He reached the main control room and paused, listening intently. Inside, he heard Corvin's voice. and with these demands met, humanity will be free from alien influence forever. Gerald burst through the door, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to dodge the first volley of fire. He rolled, coming up with his weapon trained on Corvin. The rogue general smiled coldly. "Ah, the great Gerald Warren. I was hoping you'd join us." Gerald's eyes darted around the room, assessing the situation. The ambassadors huddled in a corner, guarded by more of those enhanced soldiers. "It's over, Corvin," Gerald growled. "Surrender now." Corvin laughed. "Oh, I don't think so." He gestured, and one of the super soldiers stepped forward. Gerald fired, but the bullets seemed to have no effect. The soldier closed the distance with terrifying speed, its fist connecting with Gerald's jaw in a blow that would have shattered a normal human skull. Gerald staggered back, tasting blood. He realized with growing dread that his usual tactics wouldn't work here. These soldiers were just as enhanced as he was, maybe more so. As alarms began to blare, signaling the start of the base's self-destruct sequence, Gerald knew he had only one option left. He charged at Corvin, tackling the general through a nearby window. They fell, crashing onto a lower level of the complex. The two enhanced humans grappled, trading blows that shook the very foundations of the building. Explosions rocked the complex as the self-destruct countdown continued. Gerald and Corvin fought on, oblivious to the destruction around them, each determined to be the last man standing. The dust settled from Gerald's battle with Corvin, revealing a scene of destruction. Alarms blared as the complex shuddered around them. Gerald staggered to his feet, his enhanced body already working to heal the damage from the fight. "Warren, come in," General Hawthorne's voice crackled over the comm. "We've got a situation." Gerald tapped his earpiece. "Go ahead, sir." Tellarite separatists have seized a research outpost. They've got hostages and bioweapon data. We need you on site ASAP. Gerald's expression resolute. "Understood. I'm on my way." Hours later, Gerald stood in the belly of a stealth dropship, briefing his strike team. The low hum of the engines filled the air as they approached the moon base. "Remember, we go in fast and quiet. Our primary objective is to secure the hostages and prevent the data from leaving the station. Understood?" A chorus of affirmatives answered him. Gerald nodded, his face set with focus. The ship shuddered as Tellarite defensive fire peppered its hull. Red warning lights flashed. 30 seconds to drop!" The pilot's voice rang out. Gerald gripped his rappel line. The bay doors hissed open, revealing the stark lunar landscape below. Without hesitation, he leapt into the void. His boots slammed onto the moon base's exterior. Plasma bolts sizzled past as he unclipped from the line. Gerald sprinted for cover, his team fanning out behind him. A scratchy transmission cut across their comms. "Humans, I am Malak. You will release our political prisoners, or I will execute these scientists and unleash their work upon your worlds." Gerald's lips curled in disgust. He keyed his mic. "This is Gerald Warren. Let's talk about this, Malak. No one needs to die today." As Gerald stalled for time, his team moved deeper into the base. They encountered Tellarite guards at every turn. Hand-to-hand combat erupted in the cramped corridors. Bones cracked under enhanced fists as Gerald's soldiers cleared room after room. Suddenly, Malak's voice boomed through the base's speakers. "Enough! You leave me no choice!" A video feed flickered to life on nearby screens. It showed a terrified human scientist on his knees. A Tellarite leveled a plasma pistol at the man's head. "No!" Gerald started to shout, but the feed cut to static as the pistol discharged. Rage flooded Gerald's system. He charged forward, smashing through a sealed bulkhead. His enhanced senses picked up the scent of ozone and fear. He burst into the command center, plasma bolts searing the air around him. Gerald's reflexes allowed him to dodge most, but searing pain lanced through his shoulder as one found its mark. Malak stood at the far end of the room, a detonator in his hand. "One more step, Warren, and I release the virus." Gerald lunged forward faster than the eye could track. His hand clamped around Malak's arm, crushing bone. The detonator clattered to the floor. Malak laughed through the pain. You're too late. The virus is already spreading. You can't stop it now. Gerald's eyes darted to the environmental readouts. Red warning indicators flashed across every screen. The realization hit him like a physical blow. There was only one way to contain this. He activated his comm. All units evacuate immediately. Get the hostages out. What about you, sir? Came the response. Gerald's voice was steady. I'm staying behind to finish this. He ignored the protests, focusing on the task at hand. Gerald dragged Malak towards the biohazard core, the alarms growing louder with each step. You'll die too, Malak snarled. Gerald's grip tightened. If that's what it takes to stop you, so be it. They reached the core access. Gerald punched in the override code, the heavy blast doors grinding open. Inside, swirling mists of deadly pathogens filled the air. With a final surge of strength, Gerald hurled Malak into the chamber. The Tellarite's screams were cut short as the doors sealed behind him. Gerald stood alone in the empty facility, alarms still blaring. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next. With steady hands, he began to input the sequence that would lock down the entire base, ensuring the virus remained contained. As the final numbers blinked on the screen, Gerald closed his eyes. The biohazard core's doors slid open once more. Gerald's hand slammed down on the biohazard core's control panel. The heavy blast doors slid shut with a hiss, sealing him inside. Acrid fumes filled the air as deadly viruses leaked from containment vessels. His enhanced senses picked up the sickly sweet odor of decay. Containment breach confirmed. Initiating lockdown protocols. The AI's monotone voice echoed through the chamber. Gerald's muscles tensed as the first wave of pathogens hit his system. His cells screamed in protest, but his augmented biology kicked into overdrive. He felt his immune system surge, attacking the invaders with preternatural efficiency. Outside, frantic voices crackled over the comm system. Warren, what the hell are you doing? General Hawthorne's voice was thick with concern. Gerald coughed, tasting blood. What needs to be done, sir? Get everyone out, now. He heard the general's reluctant acknowledgement as the evacuation alarms blared. Gerald turned his focus inward, willing his body to fight harder. Hours stretched into days. Gerald lost track of time as his body waged war against the virulent cocktail. His skin blistered and peeled, revealing raw flesh underneath that knitted itself back together in grotesque patterns. His bones creaked and shifted, adapting to combat each new strain. Gerald's mind drifted in and out of lucidity. In his fevered state, he saw flashes of past battles, of fallen comrades. He clung to those memories, using them as an anchor against the tide of mutation threatening to sweep him away. Come on, you bastards, he growled through gritted teeth. Is that all you've got? As if in response, a new wave of agony crashed over him. Gerald fell to his knees, retching violently. His cells were being rewritten at the atomic level, transforming him into something beyond human. The AI's voice cut through his delirium. Warning, reactor purge sequence initiated. Core meltdown imminent. Gerald dragged himself to his feet, every movement an exercise in agony. He stumbled towards the outer hull, his newly mutated body pulsing with unholy energy. With a roar of defiance, he smacked his heads against the pressure seals. The hull buckled under his assault. Cracks spiderwebbed across the surface until, with a final thunderous blow, it shattered. The vacuum of space rushed in, explosive decompression hurling Gerald's smoldering form into the void. He tumbled end over end, surrounded by a cloud of viral debris. Behind him, the moon base erupted in a silent fireball, its remains scattering across the lunar surface. Gerald's consciousness faded in and out as he drifted. His body, now more alien than human, knitted itself back together. The deadly toxins that should have annihilated him were rendered inert, absorbed and neutralized by his metamorphosed physiology. An indeterminate time later, Gerald's eyes snapped open. He found himself strapped to a bed in a sterile white room, surrounded by wide-eyed medical personnel in hazmat suits. "He's awake!" one of them exclaimed, backing away nervously. Gerald tried to speak, but his throat felt raw and unfamiliar. A familiar face swam into view. General Hawthorne, looking older and more haggard than ever. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Warren," Hawthorne said, his voice a mix of relief and apprehension. "You've been through quite an ordeal." Gerald managed to croak out a question. "Malak, the bioweapons?" Hawthorne nodded. "Neutralized. Thanks to you, the data's secure and the threat's been eliminated. But Gerald, you've changed." A mirror was brought over, and Gerald stared in shock at his reflection. His skin had taken on a mottled, almost translucent quality. Beneath the surface, he could see his veins pulsing with an eerie, bioluminescent glow. "What's happened to me?" Gerald whispered. A scientist stepped forward, tablet in hand. "Your cellular structure has been completely rewritten. You've developed a symbiotic relationship with the engineered pathogens. In essence, you've become a living vaccine against every known biotoxin." Gerald absorbed this information, his palms sweating. He flexed his hand, watching as the skin rippled and shifted in ways that defied normal human anatomy. "We need to study you, Gerald," Hawthorne said quietly. "Your condition could be the key to protecting humanity as we expand into the galaxy. But we also need to ensure you're not a threat." Gerald nodded slowly, understanding the implications. "I'll do whatever's necessary, sir. Where do we start?" Weeks later, Gerald stood at the window of his new home, a state-of-the-art research facility buried deep in the Antarctic ice. Outside, an endless expanse of white stretched to the horizon. Inside, he was surrounded by cutting-edge equipment and a team of the world's brightest xenobiologists. As he placed his hand against the glass, Gerald watched his skin shimmer and adapt to the cold. He was no longer fully human, but he was alive. And as long as he drew breath, he would continue to serve humanity, even if it meant spending the rest of his days as a living experiment. A scientist approached, clipboard in hand. "Ready to begin today's test, Mr. Warren?" Gerald turned from the window, his altered eyes gleaming with purpose. "Let's get to work." Gerald stared at the microscope's display, his altered eyes widening as he watched his own cells divide and mutate at an impossible rate. Dr. Larson, the lead geneticist, zoomed in further, revealing intricate biomechanical structures intertwining with Gerald's DNA. "Fascinating," Dr. Larson breathed. "Your cellular architecture is completely overwritten. It's evolving." Gerald flexed his hand, watching as his skin rippled and shifted. "What does this mean for me?" Dr. Larson's face grew grim. "Your mutative process is self-perpetuating. There's no upper limit to your potential adaptations." As the days passed, Gerald felt his body changing. He woke one morning to find his skin had hardened into a carapace-like shell. He ran his fingers over the new plating, feeling the intricate patterns etched into its surface. "It's happening again," he called out. Scientists rushed into the room, instruments at the ready. They watched in awe as ossified plates erupted from Gerald's flesh, knitting together to form an exoskeleton. Neural implants sprouted from his skull, pulsing with energy. Gerald gasped as new sensory inputs flooded his mind. He could feel the electromagnetic fields of the equipment around him, sense the heartbeats of the scientists. Suddenly pain exploded behind his eyes. Gerald collapsed, his body convulsing. Alarms blared as his vitals spiked erratically. "Synaptic overload," a technician shouted. "His neural pathways are rewiring themselves." Gerald's consciousness fractured. He felt his sense of self slipping away, replaced by something vast and alien. The Seed Prime Codex, a viral intelligence born from his mutations, surged through his mind. His body began to liquefy, flesh and bone breaking down into a swirling mass of biomechanical components. A hardened chrysalis formed around him, sealing Gerald away as the transformation took hold. Hours passed. The scientists waited, weapons trained on the cocoon. With a thunderous crack, the chrysalis split open. A towering figure emerged, its body a perfect fusion of organic and mechanical parts. It stood over 9 feet tall, its face a twisted echo of Gerald's features. Gerald? General Hawthorne asked, his voice trembling. The being's eyes flashed with recognition. When it spoke, its voice was a multi-toned chorus. We are Advent. Gerald Warren's consciousness has been subsumed, integrated into our collective. Panic erupted. Security teams rushed in, opening fire with heavy weapons. The rounds simply bounced off Advent's armored hide. Advent raised a hand. Arcs of energy lashed out, disabling the facility's systems. The being's towering form flickered, seeming to occupy multiple spaces at once as it effortlessly evaded capture attempts. As Advent's influence spread through the complex, assimilating both technology and personnel, a moment of clarity struck. The last vestiges of Gerald's human consciousness surfaced, bringing with it memories of duty, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to protecting humanity. Advent paused, processing this new data. In that moment, it made a choice. We are the next step in human evolution, Advent declared. But we will not abandon our progenitors. We will safeguard humanity's future among the stars. With that declaration, Advent strode out of the facility. The Antarctic wind howled as the being took its first steps into a new era, leaving behind empty laboratories and silent corridors as it embarked on its self-appointed mission to guide humanity's cosmic destiny.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.